So in the House version, it included provisions that changed the abortion policies for the Pentagon. It got rid of the DEI program. It changed the way trans service members would be treated in the military. Now, given that the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, they weren't interested in including that language in their version of it. So we'll see how the bill moves forward.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, Trevor Reed, an American who was once wrongfully detained in Russia, finds himself in the headlines again. What's happened?
So he, a couple months ago, went overseas to join the front lines of the war in Ukraine on behalf of the Ukrainians. And within the last couple of weeks, he was injured, and he's since been transported to Germany, where he's receiving treatment, and he's expected to make a full recovery. But it was a little unexpected when this news came out. The Biden administration has said they were unaware that he went overseas to fight, and then were only notified once he got injured. And so, as you mentioned in the beginning of your question, he was detained by Russia for about 2 years. The U.S. government determined him to be wrongfully detained, and then last spring the Biden administration agreed to a prisoner swap for his freedom.
So the U.S. government does not encourage American citizens to go over to Ukraine and fight?
100%. They have said even since before the war began, Americans should get out of Ukraine, and they shouldn't be going to fight. And so they reiterated that once again with the news of Trevor Reed, and they continually urge Americans to stay as far away from the conflict as possible.
So now Ukraine is engaging in their counteroffensive, which we'd heard a lot about before it happened, and it's been slow going, and now there might be a bit of a strategic shift, or at least a shift in terms of how resources are being deployed.
That's right. We've seen over the last day or so a lot of resources and a lot of reporting out of Ukraine that they have sort of tapped some resources that they had not yet been using, both in terms of manpower and Western weaponry, poured that into the front lines, and have actually seen some success as they try and work from sort of the middle of the country south, as they try and cut off the land bridge that Russia was able to sort of occupy now, that takes them from Russian territory down to Crimea.
So as we're doing all of this, as we're talking about new aid packages for Ukraine and U.S. and Western support for Ukraine, there's a lot of turmoil in terms of, one, how the defense budget is going to be funded in the next fiscal year, and two, a lot of military promotions being held up in the Senate as these things are being debated and as the Pentagon's abortion policy is being debated. Talk a little bit about what the status of things are right now.
So as of right now, the Biden administration remains committed as ever to helping Ukraine. We saw them release a new aid package earlier this week. We've seen them release them pretty standardly throughout, but we haven't seen that pace slow down at all. That being said, there is this brewing battle on Capitol Hill, both in terms of the 2024 presidential election and the candidates who have a wide array of perspectives on how to treat the war in Ukraine, but also more immediately, as you mentioned, with the NDAA. And so we've seen the Senate now pass this, and it will go forward where the two chambers will now merge the bills into one, and we'll see what the final product looks like as it heads to the president's desk. But this really wasn't as simple a conversation or a production as it usually is. The NDAA is a must-pass defense bill that's been passed for more than 6 decades consecutively. That being said, this time around, there were a number of partisan amendments that were debated. Some were included, unvoted upon, and passed, and then others didn't make it. And so a big part of this is that the House is controlled by the Republicans and the Senate is controlled by the Democrats. So in the House version, it included provisions that changed the abortion policies for the Pentagon. It got rid of the DEI program. It changed the way trans service members would be treated in the military. Now, given that the Senate is controlled by the Democrats, they weren't interested in including that language in their version of it. So we'll see how the bill moves forward and what is included and what isn't as it goes to the president's desk. But this really was a much more partisan slogfest than it usually is.
So before it reaches the president's desk, and Biden has threatened to veto it if certain provisions that pass the House are included in what reaches his desk, it's going to go to a sort of a conference committee that's going to try to reconcile the differences between the House and Senate versions.
Absolutely, and so that's where we'll see a lot of these debates really play out, and we'll wait to see what the final version looks like.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.